Welcome to Mindful Mondays. My name is Michelle Precourt. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you, Angelique.
Nice to see you too, Michelle.
Hello, Amit.
Hello. I'm just checking the LinkedIn side of things, and it looks like the timer is still going on that end, so it might not be quite live yet.
Okay, very good. Well, we'll just jump right into things, and as that timer's ticking off, technology, we got to work with what we got. So for some of our folks who may not be familiar with Mindful Mondays, let's just start with what the heck is Mindful Mondays. So this is something that Ahmed, you and I have been working on for a number of months here now. And Mindful Mondays is really about bringing folks together who are subject matter experts like Angelique today. And this is all in around HR hot topics. So some of the things that we've talked about this year has been mental health and wellness in the workplace, career stress, and employee engagement strategies. And today we have another interesting HR topic to talk about in and around organizational change. So from there, Ahmed, I will let you take the reins.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michelle. Hello, good morning, and welcome to everyone on the call today. Today, as Michelle said, we are going to be covering off a holistic approach to organizational change. We have Michelle Precourt with us, who, of course, is the principal consultant of Mindful HR Services, and we have Angelique Mayer with us, who is with Optimum Talent, and they provide HR consulting services. Angelique is the Vice President of Leadership Development and the Market Leader for BC. She comes to us with 20 years of experience consulting with senior leaders across multiple industry sectors, where she helps organizations grow and develop high-performing leaders through coaching, assessments, and group learning. Working in both consulting and corporate roles, Angelique strives to make a difference by aligning talent strategies with organizational needs. And then myself, if you don't know me from the other calls, Ahmed Rame here. I help small and medium-sized companies with their marketing, everything from brand and personal strategy to lead generation and anything in between. But we are here to talk about a holistic approach to organizational change. So a key component to change is ensuring all stakeholders are prepared for what is coming. This includes a strong communication strategy around process and policy changes, but there's also the humanistic or emotional side to consider. In this episode of Mindful Mondays, we will discuss organizational change from a holistic viewpoint and share tools and techniques to support a seamless business transition while addressing the people side of change. So before I jump into the questions, I just want to let everyone know, if you haven't attended one of these before, we're taking questions, we're taking comments. We want you to engage with us. If you're on LinkedIn, please go into the comments section, and I'll be watching the comments as we go along. And I'll interject those comments as we're rolling through the questions and all of that. And then, of course, if you have anything, we can always address it at the end as well. So welcome, and thank you again for joining with us. So my first question, I'm going to kick it over to Michelle. So Michelle, as a curator of Mindful Mondays, tell us about your thinking around the title of this live broadcast, A Holistic Approach to Organizational Change. What do you mean by holistic in this situation?
Mm-hmm. My husband's going to roll his eyes when I talk about the left brain and the right brain, but it's true. We can be very left brain focused and focus on the process and the procedures and the policies, and all of that is really important. But when I think of holistic, I also want to bring in this right brain. And this is the self-management, self-regulation, the emotions around change. We may not even recognize what's going on, because there can be so much going on, unless we take a step back and really recognize, what is going on with me? Why am I feeling so uncomfortable? And this is where the work that I do around mindfulness can help folks to, take a step back, recognize that change is hard. It's a very vulnerable time. And of course, we need all of those things that I talked about, process and policy, and experts like Angelique. But we also need to talk about the vulnerability that comes with change. So that's what I mean by the holistic side of organizational change.
I love it. And I really appreciate that you kind of gave that opening introduction into it, so that we're all able to set the same page and be on the same understanding of what we're here to talk about. So I love that. Thank you. Angelique, when Michelle reached out to you, why did you say yes to being our guest today? And I know that sounds like kind of a funny question, but why did you want to speak on this topic of organizational change? There's so much to cover, but specifically this, I think is so relevant today, but I'd love to hear your perspective on why.
Yes, well, all of us have been through a lot of change over the last 2 years. I mean, if you work in a large organization or you work at home, we've all been forced to adapt to this new reality. And so organizational change has been a big topic because we're all living through it right now. So I wanted to share some of my personal perspective, what I'm hearing from my clients, and actually some of my own lived experiences.
I love it. I mean, the fact that you're able to share your own lived experiences with our listeners and be able to bring in that perspective of, not just the organizational side, but some of the personal side of that, it really helps to let people understand where we're coming from and how this topic might be relevant to them and how we can probably provide some insight for them. So, Angelique, building on that, given your extensive work with leaders, in your opinion, what are the must-have tools for successful and seamless business change?
Oh, business change. That's a huge question. I mean, I wish I had that simple 5-step process. And
big questions for Monday mornings, right?
Yeah, you could just follow these 5 steps and then, magically we'll have this amazing change management process. But it's not that simple, right? What we've learned, I am actually ProSci certified. So I've gone through the traditional change management process, talking about, formal communication strategies, communications plans, looking for your sponsor and all of that. But what we found is, over the last 2 years during the pandemic, those traditional ways of change management haven't worked as well. What we found, and what we teach a lot, is the people side of change is that people always aren't predictable. You can't just put out a communications plan and say, okay, everybody follow this new communications plan. Why? Because human beings are complicated, right? We don't all absorb information the same way. We don't all have the same needs. And nothing's been more apparent over the last 18 months is that we're all not starting from the same place. There's a famous quote out there, famous saying out there, we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. We're all starting from different places. So I think as a leader, of course, I always talk from the leadership perspective. If you're managing 2 people or 100 people, it's the same considerations. You really need to take stock and analysis of your people. How are your people feeling? What are the tools and resources that your people have? Is this new to them? Is this not new to them? One of the biggest things, we teach in our change management workshops is, the bigger the change, the bigger the emotional reaction folks are going to have, or it's going to feel. So little changes, the feeling associated with that is going to be, probably manageable. But these big changes where you're asking folks to do things in a new way with new technology or new resources, the change, how that's going to feel is going to be monumental for some people. And then, of course, we talk about resiliency. Some people have just naturally are more resilient, and some people are still building their resiliency. So it's hard to say, you follow these 5 steps and it's going to be great. It's all about the individual human experience. And if you are leading 100 people, and to think about, I have to connect with all 100 people and I have to make sure that everybody's okay. Yeah, it's that kind of job. And there's lots of tools and tricks on how you can reach out and engage your folks, like something like this, and set up a chat and just get people to share their experiences. I think the biggest thing is having people share their experiences. Where are they starting from? What resources do they have? Have they done something like this before? What works for them? What won't work for them? And just creating the space for people to speak up and share their experience. And that's what I love about what Michelle's doing, is this is part of creating that space for people to listen in and think about, how has my lived experience of all these changes been? Have I been supported? Have I had the right tools? What other questions do I have? And sometimes it's not even knowing what questions you want to ask. It's listening to other people's stories that say, okay, that was a question I had. I didn't know I had it, but now that I've heard your story, yes, that's exactly how I'm feeling. So storytelling is hugely powerful.
Absolutely. And I love what you said earlier about human beings are complicated. when we look at organizational change or business change, yes, of course, we think of the processes and the business side of things of what do we need to do. But there's this, the of course, human element of it. And forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, but Eugene Herbert in the comments mentioned that they just started a huge organizational change that began in July of this year, where they've grown from 1,700 to almost 4,000 employees. So when you think of the complex nature of that kind of change, she's saying change is an understatement for the entire company right now. Absolutely, because everything from processes to marketing to branding to client services, but all of that touches different people, and there's that human element of it and that complexity that comes with it, and people's emotions and feelings and how they're going on about it. So I love that you said that, and you just called it out. People are complex. Michelle, before I jump to the next question, do you have anything to add on that?
Just that complex side of life, something super small or something super big, it can trigger something within us that makes us either fearful or just feeling, so overwhelmed that we can, feel like we need to talk through things. So I think as leaders, recognizing the folks who need to be heard, and then for those other folks who, and these are the folks that are going to be knocking on the doors perpetually, right? I've got more questions, and making sure that you make time for those folks. And there's different ways of doing that, right? Doesn't mean that you have to have your door open all of the time, but where can staff get their information? So like you said, a good suggestion, hosting a call like this, using the technology that's out there. This is another way of doing like a town hall meeting, right? All hands meetings. Back in the day when we could bring everyone together, we would do that, of course. But then there's, little snippets of information that you can send out, whether that's by email, FAQs. The other part that I think is really important to address, the pandemic has taught us this, is today this might be the direction that we're going, but know that tomorrow it might change, right? Think about the public health orders. It's okay to go into restaurants. It's not okay to go into restaurants. It's okay to go into the office. It's not okay to go into the office. It's okay to bring people into your homes. It's not okay to bring people into your homes. Like, I don't know, I think this is a really good test of our change, our resilience around change, is that we are facing this every day in our personal lives.
Yeah.
So to your point, bringing those lived experiences, it's very applicable to the workplace. We're really not that different. Change in an organization or change at home isn't really that different. There might be more strategies that we have to put into place, but anyone with kids, it's the same thing. And I'm not at all suggesting that employees are kids. I am not at all suggesting.
Really? Are you sure?
No, I am not.
Sometimes there isn't that big of a difference.
But it's about the communication that is really important.
Absolutely. And I think, as we think through a lot of that, communication is such a critical thing, because as you're saying, this yo-yo effect, even just as we're going through this shared experience of this global pandemic, it's a very good example of whether it's in the workplace or not, we all have these shared experiences. And that communication is what helps calm everything. And I think this is probably a good segue, Michelle, into the next question I wanted to ask you actually was, where do you see your clients struggle with the most change, and what advice do you have for our viewers who might be in the midst of change? And this actually dovetails a question we had come in on the comments by Haya. She asked, what tools do you recommend to measure people's readiness for change? And do you think standard tools usually gives a real indicator? And so I think that it's kind of a dovetail to the initial question I wanted to ask you, so it's good timing. But just to reiterate, the question was, where do you see your clients struggle the most with change? And what advice do you have for our viewers who might be in the midst of change?
Yeah. For the folks who are in the midst of change is take what you need, take the time that you need, really sit back and reflect on what's going on with yourself, whether you are the one leading the change or whether you're the one that is in the change. What is it that you need? And maybe you don't know what it is that you need, because sometimes there's that. I've developed a bit of a exploratory question that, Amit, I'll ask you to drop into the comments there. But it's a little bit like a SWOT exercise, but a little bit different. So what are the tools and resources that you can leverage as you're going through this change? Who's your ally? Who might be a threat? Where are there opportunities? These are just some of the questions that I ask folks who are going through a change. So whether or not, like I said, you're the one leading the change or in the change, even the ones that are leading the change, you are still going through some emotions around this. And this is where the techniques that I use around mindfulness can be helpful, of just taking a step back, because sometimes that expression, you can't see the tree for the forest, because we are so caught up in all of what's going on. And in addition to that, for leaders, we feel like we need to, put on this strong face. And at times, yes, we do. But even in those opportunities, when you're putting on, the strong, we're here for you. Who's here for you? Like, who are your allies? So you don't have to be everything to everyone. You might be able to go to someone else on your senior leadership team to, let everything go, right? Behind those closed doors if you need to. And sometimes even not behind closed doors. Employees really appreciate vulnerability. Everyone is vulnerable. And, letting letting your guard down a little bit can be okay. There can be that appreciation. The other thing that I want to talk about here is a question about readiness for change. So here's just a really simple example. I might be willing to fly a plane, but am I ready to fly a plane? So I may have the motivation, the drive, the energy. I'm going to get in a plane tomorrow and fly this plane tomorrow. That's the willingness. But the readiness part is, have I gone to flight school? Have I studied? Have I ever been in a plane before? Maybe that's a good place to start, right? So I might be willing, but I might not be ready. And these are also some of the conversations that I help facilitate around the readiness and willingness for change.
Yeah, those are two distinct parts, right? We have some, in this case, we were forced into change, and a lot of companies, they are told that we're going to change. And then your employees may not be ready, like there isn't a readiness for it. And so we need to create that readiness. Like we need to be able to tell the story. So it's all about being able to tell the benefits of the outcome. That's where I like to start, is tell the truth. Like where it's going to be hard. It's not going to be straightforward. We don't have all the answers. However, what I see is at the end of this, it's going to be great because, and then really, lay out the path and lay out the end result and get people connected to how it's going to be when we're through the storm. Like what is the benefit at the end of the journey? Because I think once people have a picture, like a visual of what it's going to look like at the end, going through the hard times may not seem so daunting when they have a strong visual of what it's going to look like on the other side. So that's one of the things that we talk about. And as leaders, sometimes, like you said, when things change, tell the truth, like be vulnerable and just stick to the facts, tell the truth. And most people can handle, it didn't quite play out the way we thought. So we're making these adjustments and we want you to bear with us and stick with us and give us input and ideas on, other ways we can approach this. So I do have some strategies. These are some strategies to change. So give time to grieve the change versus going for a quick fix. Most of us just want to implement the change and do a quick fix. And what we're learning is that, that doesn't allow for all the human emotion processing time. Allow time to people to socialize to the idea and to get connected with the outcome. And then, of course, expect a temporary decrease in productivity. We're not going to be able to make all these changes and still maintain the same level of productivity. So just have some realism or some compassion. If not everybody is able to keep up their level of productivity. And of course, as a leader, be visible, be accessible to answer questions. And I know a lot of people say, I've answered this question 3 times already. And it's like, yeah, and you'll have to answer the same question 6 more times because not everybody heard you the first 3 times, right? So just be mindful that you will have to answer the same questions over and over. And get involved, right? Have a strategy for recovery. So if somebody is having trouble with the technology or they're not, keeping up with the rest of the team, what is the strategy? How are we going to help them get back on track again? Avoid deflecting, minimizing, or ignoring concerns. I know once you've said what the change is going to be, answer the questions, it's easy to ignore all of the people that are still having a hard time, but it's important that we still sit down and we still have these conversations. So maybe it's a different peer group or somebody else chatting with them, but it's still important to keep having the conversations, even though it feels like you've already had the same conversation 6 times. And then stay in touch and be available as things change and evolve. And of course, that's what you were talking about earlier, Michelle, with that open door policy and if in the virtual world, sometimes it doesn't seem like we can have an open door, but give people permission to contact you on, Teams or Slack or however the instant messaging systems work. Just, let people have an opportunity to feel like they can come to you. And of course, some key points to remember, of course, as we all do we go through change management, is change has a human cost, right? There's always a price that we're going to pay in our people. So remember that isn't always recognizable at the beginning. And sometimes halfway through the project, you realize that you're going to need to invest more in something or someone. And that's okay. That's totally normal. And it's okay. And you can minimize that cost to yourself and employees just by talking about it rather than having it sprung on you afterwards. Change is emotional, right? So remember, the change is never linear and it's always an emotional thing. You are the guiding coalition. So remember I was saying about telling the end story at the beginning, like vision the future. What is it going to look like when we're all done or we're on the other side? Make sure that you keep that at the forefront. And remember, this is one of my favorite quotes, is there is no growth. There is no change without growth, right? And growth isn't always comfortable or easy. So anytime you change anything, it's going to require some growth and it's going to be uncomfortable for folks. And so we should be prepared for that and be accepting. So I think, be accepting of what happens, even if it doesn't fall in what you think should happen.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing those. I did share your strategies to change, the quick notes that you had there in the chat there for anyone who wanted to jot those down, and we can add them again later as well. But I wanted to just open it up here and ask if anyone had any questions as we're going to be winding down here, just to be mindful of time. So if anyone has any questions, they can drop them in the chat here. So while we're waiting for those questions to come in, if there are any extras, I just wanted to highlight on Angelique, something you were saying about the brain not liking ambiguity and how to be direct and how to communicate multiple times. It's so true. Like to your point, we might, especially as leaders, say, well, we've told you this a number of times, or we've said the same thing over and over. And, we feel like you're hitting your head against a wall, but there is a point to that. So in marketing, if we use that as an example, we say someone needs to hear or see a message at least 7 times and we've all heard that. But when we're going through change, it's real.
That's real.
And especially when you're talking about change, because you're trying to motivate behaviors to do something or to change in a certain way. And that ambiguity that the brain doesn't like, it sometimes is calmed by just hearing that answer one more time or hearing it a different way or what have
We're
So I
hearing
love that
somebody else say it. Yeah, somebody
Yeah.
else say it besides the leader or the change management or the sponsor.
Mhm.
Getting everybody to say the same thing. So remember I said about the story at the end? Well, you're in
Yeah.
marketing, right? So you're talking about the story you're trying to create. So as the leader, you're trying to create the story of what the end is going to look like. And you need everybody to be able to articulate that story and say it over and over again. And that's how you get people to buy in. It's marketing,
Absolutely.
kind of
Yeah.
marketing 101.
Organizational change is marketing. I like it. That's going to be the title of the next book. Michelle, how about yourself? Do you have any thoughts or closing comments you'd like to share before we wrap up here?
Just I want to say thanks to the folks that dropped in some messages in the chat. You all have, hit the nail on the head. It's not a top-down approach. It's a multi-pronged approach. There are some tools and resources out there available. Angelique, again, is an expert in change from a real process perspective. And then, of course, I come into it from the emotional side of the world, my HR background. But there's, so many different angles that you can take. The biggest thing is that, yes, structure is important, but being sure that you touch base regularly and tap into the folks that, the loudest voice isn't the only voice. So making sure that you also are tapping into those folks who might be just sitting back and not sure how to address their concerns.
Yes, I see Udine put in the SCARF model. Yes, the SCARF model, many of you know what that is from David Rock, and it's a great way to understand what folks' triggers are. And of course, change will hit all 5 of those triggers.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I've done is I've just dropped in a couple of helpful links in the chat there. So if you scroll up, I see there's been a couple of more comments that have come up since. So Carlos is asking, what are the best strategies you have used to ensure all employees have readiness to change?
Well, you're not going to probably like this, but you have to talk to everybody. Like they have to tell you, right? It's asking the questions and seeing where they're at and it's just engaging with them. Because remember, we use the quote, we're all in this storm together, but we're all in different boats. Like we all have different levels of experience, different resources available to us, technologies, comfortability with technologies. And if you can, I know for those of you that lead larger groups, this could be very challenging, but it's really, you've got to ask people. You can do it with a survey, right? So it generates some sort of a survey that you can start asking some questions to get a sense of where your folks are at. You can start a peer group, right? So you have some executive roundtables, or call it the team roundtables, to get people to speak up and share their experiences. So the only way you're going to know is if you ask people, and you can either do it one-on-one, or you can do it in a group format, or you can do it in a survey. But it's really important that that you actually hear from folks. Now, some people are going to know exactly what they need, and some people are going to have no clue what they need, right? So how do you deal with that, right? You got to start with a conversation and start asking the questions. So as you know, come prepared with some questions to kind of get people thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. I love that, the questions part. You need to engage those people in those conversations, and the best way is to be asking really strong, really great questions, yeah. Right? So I think, looking at the clock here, I think we are at time. So I just want to thank everyone who made the time to join us today, again, for taking that time, being with us, and wanting to close out the year with our last Mindful Monday of the year with them. Michelle, can you maybe tell us about the next Mindful Monday happening on January 10th of 2022? Wow, it's a mouthful to say. I can't believe we're already getting up to 2022, right? Let's hear about it.
Yeah. This is a bit of a continuation on change, but we're coming to it from a different angle. The title of this one is Rewiring the Brain for Change. And I'm really excited to be talking with Sandra McDowell. She is the founder of E-Leadership Academy, who leverages cognitive science to help organizations thrive. So that is on January 10th, 2022.
Love it. That's going to be a really great session. I'm excited to be hosting it for you next year. and getting back into this with everyone. At this time, I think we are good to close. We've had some great comments. Thank you again, everyone, for joining with us this morning, and we'll see you next year. Happy holidays and have a happy new year.
Thank you,
Happy
everyone.
holidays, everyone. Until next time, be well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Angelique, for being with us too.
My pleasure, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thanks. Bye-bye.